All right, welcome to another episode of the Critical Introvert Show. I'm your host, Senor Filth, my co-host, Benevolent Asshole. And today we have an artist by the name of Reagan Lodge. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. So basically, I'm a graphic novelist. I live in Southern California, very rural part of San Diego County. I've been for the past few years working on a epic length graphic novel. Working title is Wyatt, which is the main character's name,
Mhm.
and it's basically kind of like a fantasy diesel punk pulp adventure in the veins of Miyazaki's Nausicaa, Indiana Jones, Redwall, and kind of the friendship focused story of Terminator 2. And so that's what I'm about right now. I've had a long life of adventure and whatnot, but that's what I'm doing these days.
Mhm. Um, I guess from the first question I have is just like, what made you start to just make your own graphic novel?
Um, Basically around like 2015 ish, I was at the tail end of a major depressive streak in life. I just gotten out of service in the Marine Corps, had done a deployment to Afghanistan, a whole bunch of other just kind of various upheavals happened in life. Not all military related, but that was certainly a huge factor as well.
Mhm.
And I had been an artist since I was about like 17, 16, and I went through such a period of extreme stress that basically my
Mhm.
creative abilities were just fried, and I was in a extremely misanthropic way of interacting with the world. And there was a time and I think this was in late 2015. I can't remember. I think it was either late 2015 or 2016 or so, around that time frame. I was started doing like some, you could call it therapeutic sort of exploring and what have you, but
Mhm.
both spiritual and psychedelic and things like that. And and I had come across various stuff like the writings of Carl Jung.
Mhm.
Little had just discovered Jordan Peterson at the time, and all that. And during a particular session where I basically just went kind of deep into my subconscious. Uh, I kind of dredged up this story involving these two characters, very unlikely characters, forced to go on this incredible journey together to this holy mountain, basically, where they would find healing in a way. And I didn't fall. I knew what the ending was, and I roughly sort of knew what the beginning was, but everything in between
Mhm.
was a slow process of me figuring out over a period of the following year or two. But I've always wanted to do comics. I had done comics in the past before. I've been published in the Flight Comics anthology, uh, put out by Image Comics and Random House Publishing back in the day. That was a long time ago. I did
Mhm.
some comics for Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I was always a storyteller. Like even as a little kid, like recording like fake little radio dramas and stuff on a tape deck and whatnot, and writing stories. But I could never get anybody but myself to really care about them. And
Mhm.
I always wanted to be somebody who could tell stories with other people and just I don't know, kind of engage with the world that way,
Mhm.
with people around me that way. And in late high school, I realized like, well, maybe a way to get people to notice or care about my stories is to give them pictures. So
Yeah.
I took, started teaching myself how to draw. And one thing led to another. Originally, I wanted to be an animator. Then I went through a phase where I wanted to be a, more classical illustrator and or a concept artist. But
Mhm.
comics were what always kept pulling me back. But there was always a reason where it's like, oh, comics, you can't make a living in that unless you're like Frank Miller or Mike
Yeah.
Mignola or one of these big guys. But it's I couldn't let go of it. And so eventually I just realized like, you know what? I've got the rest of my life to work on all kinds of other jobs. I'm not gonna have the rest of my life to, try a big, epic, insane comic like this, and there's no time like the present to start on it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's cool. Like, did you? how much experience do you have like working professionally in the comic book field? Like as far as like, did you do anything for Marvel, DC, or you said you did stuff with the Image Comics? Uh,
Yeah, so the stuff that I did with Image Comics was those were my own stories and original art, and actually the character that appears in it is the same character in the graphic novel I'm
hmm,
doing now. Just is heavily redesigned, and the whole world and story is significantly restructured. But those were just two anthology spots, really.
hmm,
I mainly those two spots really like they just opened up a ton of freelance work for me. And aside from that, I did work for Nickelodeon Magazine,
hmm,
which for their Avatar: The Last Airbender comics, which was that was one of the best comic jobs you could get at the time.
hmm,
Like paid very well,
hmm,
and it was a really cool intellectual property. I loved Avatar, and so working on that was a lot of fun. You can find, I think you can find my old comic that I did for Avatar in the Dark Horse Avatar: The Lost Tales collected like omnibus or something.
hmm.
It's just understand that it's really really old art. Like I didn't know what I was doing
Yeah.
back then. I'm very thankful for them to for giving me the job back then. But it's like if I
Hmm,
could go back and tell myself like to do a bunch of things differently, I'd definitely do that.
hmm, hmm. So are you relatively mostly self-taught for the most part, or?
I would say mostly. I did go to art school. I went to a summer program at Cal Arts when I was in high school for animation. That was about a month long program or so.
Hmm.
And at the time I wanted to be an animator, but actually doing 2D animation, like flipping
Yeah.
pages and stuff like that, working, till like 4 a.m. In a the sub level of Cal Arts, which is like this dungeon basically. It kind of made me realize like, okay, I love animation, but I don't know if I want to do animation.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was my earliest schooling. I did take some like community college life drawing classes just to learn the human figure. And I
Hmm.
did after I got out of the Marine Corps. Uh, my skills were so wrecked that there was just no way in hell anybody in their right mind would hire me for anything. I was able to get some freelance kind of commissions here and there, but it was like pulling teeth to
Hmm.
do them. Like, something that could take me like an hour or two today was taking me like 8 or 10 hours back then just because I was so deficient and
Hmm.
atrophied in what I could do. So I did go to a public university, Virginia Commonwealth University, for a couple of years on the GI Bill. Just I was not because it's like generally speaking, I don't really advise art school to people,
Hmm.
but I was aware enough of my own professional needs, and I understood that okay, I can't get a job in art right now, and unless I want to like reenlist or go into I don't know private security contracting in Africa or something like that, that I really don't have that many prospects. So it's like, well, I can use the GI Bill to get fed, live kind of cheap, save up some money, and have a structured studio type space
Hmm.
and a little bit of positive peer pressure to uh, rebuild my skills that had atrophied over the past several
Hmm.
years and pick up some new ones along the way.
That's cool. Um, I guess from like for your background of the military, like, would you say has any of that sort of like influenced your like storytelling in a way?
Oh yeah, definitely. I don't. Oh, when I tell people that, a lot of them assume that I must enjoy. I don't know, the comic book equivalent of like Call of Duty type stuff, or like tactical realism,
Hmm.
graphic novels, and whatnot. Those kinds of comics that read like they're just meant to be a Netflix pitch for the next 24
Yeah.
or Zero Dark 30 type thing. And while I think that kind of storytelling has its place. I find that stuff boring as hell personally, and so for me, I've always gravitated towards fantasy or the hyphenated punk type genres like steampunk and diesel punk and stuff like
Hmm.
that, where there's a little bit of a fantastical element, romantic element to it, but I like to infuse it with a sense of my own lived experience in it. And
Hmm.
while some of it, does come from my own personal military experience. It's not what I would call like a war story. It's more like a story that has war as the backdrop.
Hmm.
It's like it's a world that's been tired out and hollowed out by war, but the story itself is not necessarily about like a Band of Brothers combat story or anything. It's about this, this farm boy kind of swept up into events way out of his control.
Hmm.
And you could say kind of like how Disney's Mulan, it takes
Yeah.
place in a war context, but is it a war story? Not really.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff I'm into, and I also I also like a lot of like 80s type action where action heroes were all on steroids and
Yeah.
firing, belt-fed machine guns from the hip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zero cares given to realism and
Yeah.
trigger discipline. I love that stuff. So like do not look to my comics for any kind of like, oh, is he drawing the gun this way because this is what he did in the Marines and
Yeah.
stuff? It's like, no, I'm just drawing it because that's what I think is cool. And if there's any realism in it, it's just incidental.
Hmm. uh I guess like to go like with the main topic I wanted to sort of talk about, just like generally the fall of mainstream entertainment. You kind of brought up the idea of like 80s action movies. I brought up this idea of like it feels like there's this strange war on just overall just fun in general as far as entertainment. um like the thought of like the commando type movie coming out within recent time, I don't even think that's even going to be possible. um like do you think do you think like there's any hope for entertainment as far as like it just getting back to the fun?
In mainstream entertainment, I would say next to none.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, there's a few, mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream storytellers out there who are putting out quality stuff. For example, like Mad Max Fury Road is a pretty recent
Hmm.
example. I mean, to me, that's just one of the best films made in human history, I think.
Yeah.
It's like right for me, it's like right up there with like Gone with the Wind and the Ten Commandments and Wizard of Oz and Star Wars and what have you. But
Yeah.
it's more and more like good films are the exception, not the norm. And
Hmm.
you can say that, oh, there's always been a majority of crappy films and stuff.
Hmm.
But I think it's a very different kind of low quality that we're dealing with now. I mean,
Hmm.
you look at most action movie characters now, and there is no larger than life
Hmm.
quality to most of them. I mean, you have The Rock, kind of, but
Yeah.
he's I don't know. It's kind of like all of the movies he's in now are kind of like parodies of that anabolic action hero in a
Yeah, he
way.
he seems too nice and
Yeah,
cheery. Like I miss the dumb action guy, and I mean that in the most positive way.
yeah, like the Conan archetype, where it's
Yeah.
like unimaginative people will look at it and think like, oh, this is so lowbrow. There's no cerebral element to it, but it's like no, actually, it's like part of why the Conan archetype
Hmm.
uh wins and how he outwits the
Hmm.
antagonist is that everyone else around him is being big brained and clever and thinking that they can outwit and scheme and magic their way
Hmm.
into winning in the world. And Conan is just, he has this purity of vision, this clarity
Yeah.
about what he wants and what he seeks, and he's just really direct about it. And that's the beauty of it, and especially today, that's a really rare thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something. I also gotta admit, like when I was a kid, I had no idea that there was a first Conan, so I just saw the second one and thought that was awesome.
Oh,
But
really?
then,
The Conan the Destroyer? That was the
yeah, the
one?
one with Wilt Chamberlain and what's that singer woman?
Oh, yeah, Grace
Yeah,
Jones.
Grace Jones.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, she was awesome in that.
yeah, she was something, but
Like 7 feet tall.
yeah,
That
and
awesome flat top. Anyways,
but I had no idea like that's regarded as the bad one, and then I saw the original one like years later, and like, oh, okay, this one's actually a little bit more serious as far as like the story wise. There's no like over the top Grace Jones character,
Yeah. It's
but
it's a really wonderfully written story too. It's done by
mhm.
John Milius, who also gave us Apocalypse Now. He was the screenwriter, or I think he
Oh
edited the
really?
screenplay. Yeah, Coppola was the director, but Milius was the script guy. He
Di-
also gave us
Didn't
some
he?
key scenes
Didn't he
in Jaws as
also?
well.
Yeah, he did the. I think he did the dialogue, the famous dialogue for Jaws,
Yeah,
the doll's eyes.
yeah. Talking about the was it the USS that ship that was sunk in World War II in the
Mhm.
Pacific, and the sailors talking about the sharks, and it's really eerie.
Yeah.
But yeah, Milius also he was the guy who gave us Red Dawn and The Wind and the Lion. So he's a very high thumos storyteller.
Hmm. I recently saw a while ago a documentary about him,
Oh yeah.
about being like outed as like a conservative or something like that within Hollywood. Did you see that?
I don't think he was ever really outed. He was just always known to be a black sheep in Hollywood.
Hmm.
He would like open carry handguns and stuff in like in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And and uh he was this like big like hulking
Hmm.
dude, and he also had like a lot of survivor's guilt because he tried to volunteer for service during Vietnam, and he was disqualified for medical grounds. I can't remember what it was
Hmm.
exactly, but he had like just tremendous survivor's guilt about that. Like some of his, I think, from what I understand, some of his high school friends died, and he
Hmm.
always, he just never resolved that, I guess, in a lot of ways. Well, the way he kind of resolved it was through his storytelling and
Hmm.
stuff. He gave us these films that inspired, you know, generations of mostly young men
Hmm.
to consider, military service and stuff like that. Yeah,
Hmm.
but he was always like openly I don't know if he would characterize himself as like a reactionary or
Hmm.
conservative even. He told there's a quote where he said, this is John Miles. He said, "I'm so far right that I'm an anarchist. I'm a Maoist." Like he basically just said that like that he was so far right that like the Wignats and stuff had nothing on
Yeah.
him, and he was this big burly Jewish dude who would carry like 1911s on set and stuff, and he's an epic character.
Yeah. Is he still around or is he
He is, yeah. He survived a stroke sometime in the past 10 years, and I don't know what his recovery has been like. I have a mutual friend with his daughter, Amanda Milius.
Mhm.
She was actually on a podcast recently talking about him, I think.
Mm.
It's a podcast called The Perfume Nationalist, if you want to look it up.
Food
Um,
nationals.
but yeah, Amanda Milius, she was the guest on the show, and yeah, he got hit hard by a stroke, and I think there was some thievery that went on with an accountant or something. And he got thrown some real nasty curveballs in life. So I don't know what his status is as far as filmmaking goes,
Mhm.
but he is still around, and I hope we get to see some more out of him.
Yeah, because I was under impression that he was sort of kind of outed because I do know um what's his name the main character the John Goodman's character in Big Lebowski I think
Yeah,
is
it's
based
based
on
off of
him.
him.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
sort of portrays him as like this over the top wingnut guy, not in a totally positive way, but he is
I
likable.
I've heard mixed things. I heard that it was meant to be kind of like a. I've heard, I can't verify that it was meant to be kind of like a playful, kind
Hmm.
of like parody, not malicious in any way. The thing that seemed to happen with him, and obviously I can't speak for Milius
Hmm.
or Amanda, but um, it seemed to be that like everybody was okay with him being openly, Mr. NRA in
Hmm.
Hollywood for the longest time, and then sometime in the, I don't know, maybe towards the late 90s or the 2000s or so, um, that's when you started to see a little bit more of this, like, well,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to work with those people over there kind of
Yeah.
thing going on. So it's like, it's not like anybody like ever outed him or anything like that. He was always open about who he was.
Mm-hmm.
It's just over time, the other culture
Yeah.
shifted away from allowing, people like him to share the same room basically,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, very sad. I mean, it's, from what I understand, like guys like, Steven Spielberg, I think still think positively of him. I think Spielberg was in that documentary, if I remember correctly. I could be
I
thinking of
think
someone else, but
I think you're right. I think I remember
yeah.
him speaking pretty highly about him.
Yeah, but it's like still, it's like, it's such a leviathan that, if you basically just do not take, if you don't burn incense before their idea of Caesar, you're kind of just, they might keep you around if you're useful enough, but it's possible that as soon as, like, if you make a mistake
Mm-hmm.
that other people might get away with, you're more likely to just not be invited for the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it seemed. That's what seemed to happen to Miles. Whereas everybody else were given a lot more chances and stuff like that, and he was kind of like, after, I don't know, maybe he hit a couple box office flops. I don't
Duds.
know if he
Yeah.
had any flops, but it's like, other people could kind of get away with some flops, and
Mm-hmm.
for him it was like, the goodwill was
Mm-hmm.
had run out.
Yeah. Did you ever experience, like, when you worked for for Nickelodeon or whatever, like any I guess pushback, like, because of your views, or did you even express them or anything like that?
So at the time, like, that was in the 2000s, which, you know may as well have been a different
Mm-hmm.
universe altogether.
Yeah.
I will say that, like, all the people that I worked with back then with Flight Comics and, and Nickelodeon stuff, I'm, as far as I know, like, we're all still on pretty good terms.
Mm-hmm.
And, the occasional times where, I catch up with any of them or something like that, I don't really sense any negative will or anything. I mean, I don't really like, I don't, I'm not super like in your face about
Mm-hmm.
my religion and stuff like that. I mean, but at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, I don't hide it. It's more like, it's like, look, it's a fact of life, a fact of my life. I'm an Orthodox Christian. I'm not just Christian. I'm Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to hide it, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not like looking at a way to like always like shoehorn it into every
Yeah.
conversation, because it's just, I mean, I remember when I was, severely had walked away from Christianity for a long time. There was nothing I hated more than
Mm-hmm.
people just kind of, they always had the sense that, they were just waiting for an opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
witness to you or something like that. I hated that.
Yeah.
But it's like all those people that I actually worked with, they were always really cool to me. I mean, we never really talked that much politics or
Mm-hmm.
hypersensitive stuff amongst each other in the first place. Um, it's, so I would say for them, for the most part, I didn't really encounter any problems. I don't really have
Mm-hmm.
anything negative to say. Um, so just mute that. Um, the I would say the only pushback I received was, in maybe like the past, few years. There was a period where
Mm-hmm.
I went through like I said before, I went through a severely misanthropic kind of period in life, and that kind of manifested itself in the form of, you know, flirting with like way edgier ideology and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
long before I had uh, any sense of what I was supposed to be doing spiritually in life.
Mm-hmm.
And, what that stuff gets dredged up, and people freak out and act like, something that you said, 6 or 8 years ago, it, hold on one second. I'm getting a knock at the door.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, in the meantime, I was going to
Yeah.
ask him,
What's
since
up?
he stepped away. one of the questions I was going to ask, I just didn't want to like mess up the flow of the conversation. So was what he thought, or like even you can answer the question was, what do you guys think about iconic heroic characters, like the
Hmm.
ones you guys were talking about, like from the 80s, like being
Hmm.
replaced by female characters? So
Yeah, that would be a good question to ask him because I have a specific I have a kind of an opinion on that.
yeah.
But I guess I'd like to see. I'd like to.
Exactly. I have like an opinion about that too, but I would
Yeah,
like to hear
I
his
guess to give a
his point of view.
preview to give a preview of my opinion. It's like it's annoying, but I think there are good ways to go about it. Um, but I'll get
Yeah,
more into that.
yeah, like and to like give my opinion too. It's yeah, it is annoying, but I think what it is too is that there's two a masculine energy and feminine energy are
Hmm.
very different from each other. So it doesn't mean that there can't be strong female characters. I think that it needs, like you're saying, it needs to be done tastefully and m- more realistically, more kind of
Hmm.
like a female, like more something that has like more authentic to like a female energy. Like if it's gonna be like a strong female character, it should be
Hmm.
more. It should feel more like a female, a believable female character versus a female
Yeah.
trying to be like a guy.
I
Okay,
guess
back. Sorry about that. I somebody was dropping off some workout
uh,
equipment that
no
had been
problem.
missing for a year.
I guess
Oh.
Benel, if you want to ask a question, we were just getting into it.
Yeah, like the question I wanted to ask earlier was that as you guys were talking about like 80s iconic characters, like a lot of these cool characters like the Rambo and Terminator. And I think a lot of the problem is that some of those historically famous characters are being replaced by female characters. And I would like to know what you think about a lot of these masculine characters being replaced by females
I think it's
nowadays.
dumb. I think it's
Yeah.
dumb. It's like, you know, there's so many characters out there that are just
Hmm.
like original female characters that are freaking awesome. Like
Hmm.
take Samus from the Metroid games, for
Yeah.
example. I mean, it's like I that was like that was my first video game crush. And it's like, but she's badass. She's like this what like this Valkyrie woman in powered armor and like that. And
Hmm.
part of her strength is how silent of a character she is. She's almost like a in a way like this, in the sort of the same realm as like a Clint Eastwood,
Hmm.
silent bounty hunter who's kind of legendary throughout the galaxy type of feel. So I think whenever people do this whole like, oh, we got to reboot this character as, we got to change this character's race or their sex or whatever. I think one, it's unimaginative. It's like
Hmm.
it is seriously like just a total like creative mouth breather move,
Yeah.
honestly. And two, I think they do it knowing that it's going to generate controversy and PR. They know that it's going to make a bunch of YouTubers freak out and go like, "Oh, look at what these SJWs did this
Yeah.
time."
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, it's like, like I share I roll my eyes at that stuff too. Like
Hmm.
I don't like it when like I know exactly why they're rebooting these characters as something that they're not,
Hmm.
but at the same time, you can't let yourself be baited into the outrage. It's like if you just kind of treat them as like, oh, you're an unimaginative,
Yeah.
overpaid fan artist. Sucks to be you, I guess. It's
Well,
like, if you treat it like that or you just ignore it, I think that's the best route. It's
Hmm.
I have some friends who they pull in the YouTube views by doing the hot takes about that stuff, and for me, it's like
Yeah.
that kind of thing is going to exist. Like corporate entertainment has been eating its own vomit for years now, and it's only going to get worse.
yeah,
Yeah.
it seems that they're just getting really aggressive with just specifically it's always they're attacking masculine energy. Like it's always a female trying to replace like a masculine character. Always like, okay, a female can be Superman, that's fine. But then it's like you never see like a male character trying to be like Wonder Woman. It's always like the female character trying to be
Hmm.
masculine when they're not. And I think I was telling Mr. Phil that I think it could be done. Like a feminine character can be also strong, but like you
Hmm.
said, it has to be done tastefully.
Yeah.
And because feminine energy is a lot different than masculine energy. When a
Yeah.
when a female is acting more like a guy, that it's almost, it takes away their unique identity. So it's like, what's the point of having a girl play a guy if she's a girl? I don't know if that makes
I
any
don't know.
sense.
It's like
Yeah.
for
This
me,
doesn't
it's
make sense
like,
to me.
you know, if I would point to like how Hayao Miyazaki handles a lot of his female protagonists. I think that the way he does it is absolutely masterful. Where you know you have characters like Princess Nausicaa, you know she's a princess literally.
Mhm.
You know she has this royal, refined, feminine magic to her, but at the same time it's like she's also a princess, and
Yeah.
in you know a kind of fantasy feudal world, even in the real world, you know princesses would have to expect that you know there might be a time where it's like she might be expected to be present at a battlefield to inspire the troops or something, or to defend herself from
Mhm.
assassins and whatnot. So it makes total sense that she
Yeah.
would be you know this badass,
Mhm.
you know, who can use a sword and do all this stuff. And it's also like she's in a world that's very austere. It makes
Mhm.
total sense because it's like a frontier world. You know, it's kind of like how you know women in the Wild West. You know, whether they were you know the wives of mountain men and cowboys and stuff, or American Indian women and whatnot. It's like it was a hard environment,
Yeah.
and you had to do things that were tough, but at the same time it's like you know there was still this appreciation for the different energies of
Mhm.
man and woman, which you know I totally agree with. In my graphic novel, for example, the main villain is female, not because it's like it's not meant to say anything by that. It was more like it's like you know I have this really cool idea for a villainess that I've
Mhm.
it's kind of been lurking in my mind, and I wanted to kind of make something cool where it's basically like I wanted to you know take something a little bit inspired by Princess Kushana from Miyazaki's Nausicaa,
Mhm.
um, and also make it be like, okay, what if Judy Hopps from Zootopia was a Warhammer 40K commissar? And so it's like you know I wanted to explore that and have like a villain who's fearsome and terrifying, but she has a different energy to her than the male characters around her.
Mhm.
And you know I'm not saying anything like deep or profound with that. It's just she has a different energy
Mhm.
fundamentally to me, and you know and I charge that with I don't know whatever Jungian or Freudian stuff you want to read into it or whatever.
Yeah.
um and so I think that it can totally be done. I just think the problem is when you know in mainstream entertainment when people do this, frankly
Mhm.
it's spiteful, you know,
Mhm.
where they take characters that are loved as they are and reboot them as something that they're just not.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly. I was going to ask you, as a writer slash artist, do you think that you're writing the story and imposing your views onto the characters, or do you think the characters are the ones that dictate the story? So, like, if you have like
it's
you when you develop a character, do you think he's sort of like you have to tell a story based off of his character, or do you just because the reason I'm asking this is because it seems that a lot of the things the woke shows are coming out is that a lot of stuff that's being imposed on these characters are things that they wouldn't normally do based off of the character that was created. So that was my question. Like, what do you think about that?
I think that you can do characters that are in a way kind of mouthpieces for your own thoughts, and it can be
Mhm.
done in a very compelling way. I mean, the best way to do it, I think, is to do it in a way that's just not insulting to the
Mhm.
audience.
It's not
I think
preachy.
I Yeah, I think Frank Miller in Dark Knight Returns was a good example of this, where he on one hand it's like he was making fun of conservatives with you know
Mhm.
his depictions of Ronald Reagan as this total
Yeah.
like
Yeah. I was just
buffoon.
watching that yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
the animated film is really faithful to the
Yeah. It's
graphic
really good.
novel.
Yeah.
It's really good, yeah. And on the other hand, it's like you know, yeah, it's like he's making fun of like the Ronald Reagan Republicans and stuff at the time, but he's also making fun of the left, you know, as being these kind of like, oh, you know, we can solve all of our problems if we just have
Yeah.
enough therapy and sitting in circles talking about our feelings, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
What was it? The doctor that the Joker's doctor
oh
that claimed
yeah,
that like Batman was creating the villains himself or some
Yeah,
shit like
yeah, and
that.
so it's
Yeah.
yeah, and I do. So here's the thing: I do have all of I think all of my characters in some way are fragments of myself.
Hmm.
Either fragments of myself at either different points in life or different potentialities. And they're just sort of like parts of my own psyche broken off and exaggerated
Hmm.
into these, fully fleshed out characters. So you'll see characters that are at odds with each other saying, they're both fighting against each other, but they're both saying things that I believe or believed at
Hmm.
some point.
I see. Yeah.
And it's just for me, it's just, I'm just writing from what I know, I'm not necessarily saying like this character is saying this, therefore I believe this is how it should be. To
Hmm.
get, if you want to get an understanding of how I believe it should be, you have to look at the whole story in its whole journey. Because it's like, even the main character Wyatt, uh he says and wants some pretty messed up things, and he has to learn along the way that there's a better way to live, and stuff like that. So, and I think that's a problem with a lot of storytellers, is that they assume that if somebody writes a character, making some, I don't know, some kind of moral statement or something, then that must be completely indicative of the creator's views or something. Or it's like, oh,
Hmm.
you did this villain and they have this or that aesthetic to them. Oh, is that a dog whistle for something?
Yeah.
And it's like, no,
I
sometimes
don't think, no, not always.
yeah,
But
it's
I
like,
think I agree though with you. With yeah, with any writer, all our writers, I think they tend to vicariously write their characters based off of like their own experiences. I agree with that. I think the problem that happens is that over time, it seems that when a character is acting out of character, it happens when there's not a demonstration of like a hero's journey. I can agree that like a character can be anything. They can show any kind of emotion or agenda. It's just that you need to be able to show that in your comic or through your story. Like that's sort of like character arc. How did he get
Hmm.
yeah,
from being this way to this way? How do you get from A to B? And it seems that a lot of these woke shows, it's always like you're like they go from one extreme to the other extreme without any explanation in between. I think that's where I have the problem.
yeah.
Um,
I
but
think a lot of it comes from a lot of people who they've grown up in the same LA or New York City bubble,
Hmm.
and they've just, for lack of a better word, they've just never taken a punch to the face. And it's like, it's like I grew up as the one of the only white kids around an Indian reservation, and so it's like
Hmm.
I got the living crap kicked out of me and jumped and stuff like that. But it's like, I made friends by fighting back and whatnot. And and it's, yeah, it's also like, I think it also comes down to like empathy, and by that I mean real empathy, not this kind of like Twitter posturing kind of like I'm so empathetic, I love everything that everybody's doing, and
Yeah.
oh,
I'm
everybody's
so
great.
accepting. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, and those are some of the cruelest people you'll ever meet.
they really
uh
are.
yeah, but I mean, like, when I say empathy, I mean, it's like, it's, I think for me it's a, it's a very, it's a Christian understanding of like, sometimes when somebody is being horrible to you, there is they're doing it, out of, there's something that's hurtful happening to them, whether or happened to them,
Hmm.
that's making them act that way, or they're letting it make them act that way. And while ultimately it is their responsibility, and you don't have any obligation to just, be passive and take it lying down, but at the same time understanding that, if somebody's saying something like really, vile, reprehensible, or hateful, or attacking you or something, you kind of, or when they, how do I put it, if they're writing these characters where it's obvious that it's like, it's a malicious caricature of, like, I don't know, middle
Trump.
America, or their evangelical dad that they have hatred for, or whatever,
Yeah.
you can tell when it's written out of a place of just pure spite,
Hmm.
and it's just mouthpiecing their anger and stuff, as opposed to, trying to, I'm not a fan of, like, quote, devil's advocating or something like that. I think that's kind of boring in Reddit mode. But I think that if you're unable or unwilling to understand why people you wildly disagree with or have no experience with think differently from you, if you completely discount the fact that it's entirely possible that they've had a totally alien set of lived experience to you,
Mhm.
and you're probably just never going to understand it, and to try and reduce them to a stupid caricature, I mean, you might
Yeah.
be able to get away with you might be able to get away with it, if your audience is, on the same wavelength as you, but
Yeah.
you also run the risk of insulting a
Yeah.
significant portion of your audience, who might be, I don't know, they might be people of faith, it might be people of a certain race or identity or whatever. I don't know, or they just might be, not even like Republican or conservative. They might just be a gun owner and they
Mhm.
just don't like being portrayed as this lowbrow, insecure ho ho. They have, they're insecure about their dick size or something,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Did you notice, like, I've only like noticed within a few years, like that, like what you're talking about, like how they're portraying the other side. It went from like being kind of funny, but now it just seems like it's blatantly just being a lot more mean and cruel nowadays. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's no
it's
empathy. Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it comes down to, it's like, it's a lot of people are writing stories where they literally believe that, you are a white nationalist if you voted differently from them.
Hmm.
It's like it does like, it's like when I told people like that I didn't even tell people what I voted for. I just said like I didn't vote for Hillary, in the 2017 election. It's like a bunch of people just flipped on a dime
Hmm.
like that on me without even asking, why. And it's like, look, my friends were coming home in body bags for these never-ending wars, and the mean asshole on Twitter was the guy saying that he wanted to end the wars.
Hmm.
It's like I had to vote where I thought the least bloodshed and suffering would be.
Hmm.
And and people would just they just would not hear it. And it's like, I don't know.
Do you think
There's
it?
a whole bunch of theories on why,
Uh,
it went like that. It's just I think it just comes down to
was it?
they need to be able to hate people.
Was it like the whole Trump election that made you notice it? Because for me, that's when I kind of noticed like that there was this like,
For
um,
me, it was actually before that. It was
mhm,
probably like midway through the Obama years when I was,
mhm,
I started off in the Marine Corps as I was, an Obama supporter. I was, kind of a centrist with some right wing sensibilities. Like I liked, I was all about firearms rights and stuff like that. But at
mhm,
the same time, I was like, we do need, like, we need some kind of, I don't know, public healthcare option or something like that and stuff. So it's like, I had a lot of, I wouldn't call myself a moderate, but I wouldn't have considered myself necessarily a right wing either.
mhm,
Um, but it was, during midway through the Obama years, I just kind of started noticing more and more of, various like identity politics and stuff like that taking
mhm,
off, where there was this whole idea taking shape in, I think I really noticed it around like 2012 or so, 2011 to 12 or so, this whole idea that like, if you, if if you're a person of privilege, whatever that means,
mhm,
then you have this responsibility to take steps A, B, and C in order to be a good person in good social standing. And if you do not take these steps, you're either suspect or you're a racist or you're bigot or whatever.
mhm,
And when that was happening, I my big reaction was, it's like, look, I understand that, yeah, I do have some privileges in life and stuff, but there's also a lot of my entire lived experience ran completely contradictory to everything that was being starting to be pushed with this whole privilege narrative.
yeah,
And in any kind of like, just, reasonable like objection to it was met with just this frothing hostility. Like, how could you even like say that? Like, only like a racist would say that. And I was like,
Mhm.
holy crap. It's like I was kind of dumbfounded. And, you know, that right there sort of kind of fed into me going off, down away, running away into the complete extreme the other way, because I thought like, well, if they're going to call me, this various ist or phobe or whatever, then I might as well, go to where it's like, nobody's going to call me that, and so
Yeah.
and all that. And eventually I realized like, that's kind of a stupid way to handle things, but it's, I don't know, I think that was when it really started, was in the early 2010s. I don't necessarily
Mhm.
think it was just the Trump election or whatever. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, that was probably like the most visible big change for things. That was where you really started to see people like turning against their own
Mhm.
families over things. And but I think that it had been really taking shape long before that. And I think it really just kind of came down to this sort of this uptick in, identity politics for me but not for thee, and we're going to lump you in with this
Mhm.
racial collective or whatever. But it's like, if you do that, people are going to start racially collectivizing, and they're not
Yeah.
going to do it in a good way. they're
Yeah.
going to they're going to do it in a way that's completely cut off to whatever, you know potential there is for dialogue.
Yeah.
And
Doesn't Jordan Peterson talk about that? About
yeah, he does.
um like how
Yeah,
it's
he
just gonna
does.
feed the other side
Yeah,
in a
he
weird way.
does. And I don't entirely agree with his approach to it. Like, I don't think that this whole like colorblind approach is really something that works either, because it's at the end of the day, it's, my experience is growing up as a white minority in a predominantly Latino and American Indian area.
Mhm.
Even though I had a lot of shared experiences with, my friends from those identity groups, our experiences were just so very different. And I
Mhm.
think to pretend that you know to pretend that our race or whatever had no role in it, I think is kind of stupid.
Mhm.
And it can be insulting. I've had friends who explained it as like, look, uh, if you if you try to like, deny somebody's, I don't know, whatever their ethnicity or their identity is, you're basically saying that, oh, everything bad that or good that happened to you solely only happens on an individual basis or something, which really is not
Mhm.
necessarily the case. There is bigotry, there is hatred in the world.
Mhm.
It does affect things. It does cause people serious, pain and trauma. But there has to be a conversation about, what happens when it's, for somebody who's like, an 8-year-old, you know white kid or something, getting
Mhm.
beat up because he's the only,
Mhm.
honky around and stuff like that. It's like, are we going to keep telling people like that, like, oh, they've got this and that privilege and they have
Yeah.
to, live this life of emotional blackmail? I don't think that's
Mhm.
going to work. I think that's going to have the directly opposite effect in a
Mhm.
really in a pretty nasty way.
Yeah. Because I mean, yeah, I totally see if stuff like this continues, like maybe even a possible like civil war type thing going on, which I don't want to happen.
I don't. I
Not
I I've,
necess-
I
not
don't
necessarily
really.
through a race thing, but I mean like just through this division bullshit.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like, I disagree with some of the far, some of the more far right, well, left people on this, that whatever future conflict there is, I don't think it's necessarily going to be this, I don't know, race war or whatever that, some of
Mhm.
the more skull mask people fantasize about and stuff like that. I think that, I think that stuff like religion is probably going to play a very large role. I think that
Mhm.
it's none of it is going to be as clear cut and categorized as people fantasize about it being.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at, the North Ireland Troubles or the Lebanese Civil War, they were incredibly confusing, and the Balkans and stuff like that. And even though you could draw lines on a map and say that, oh, this tribe here was always fighting with that tribe there, and it's like, well, there were also people
Mm-hmm.
kind of playing the go-between and stuff like that. And I don't know what the future is going to hold. I don't think it's I think that things are going to get more and more unstable. Do I think it's going to become like this like civil war apocalyptic scenario? I don't think so, but at the same
Mhm.
time, I just I'm an extremely paranoid person, so I like to just I don't live in a city. Try to not I try to not live in a way that would make me vulnerable to the unpredicted in life.
Mhm.
I'm not like a prepper or anything like that. I don't how do I put it? I don't, buy into a lot of the doomsday stuff out there. I think that
Uh-huh.
even if things look really bleak, you know, I think you kind of have to you can't let it get you down. You can't let it, you know, darken your soul basically.
Mhm.
You can't y- how do I put it? You have to still like try to see the best in people,
Mhm.
and without overextending yourself to the point where you make yourself so vulnerable that you get hurt all the time. You don't want to do that either, because that'll just embitter you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I think if you just have, you know a bit of just empathy for people, regardless of who they are, what group or identity they belong to, and just give everybody a fair shake as
Mhm.
much as you can within your income level or
Yeah.
resources or mental emotional faculties or whatever. I think that's really just the best thing anybody can do. And I think if you do that, you'll probably avoid a lot of the trouble that will befall a lot of other people who go out, seeking and stirring up conflict and hatred.
Mm. Do you think like the people that love that like drive the hatred and stuff, like do you think they genuinely enjoy it or do they even know that they do it? Because I have some people in my family that are that are the types that like if there's Thanksgiving dinner, they're gonna bring up, oh, the Indians died for white people for this dinner.
Hmm.
But, yeah, like, do you think they know that they're doing that, or do you think they like enjoy it? Or
I don't
I don't
know.
know,
It's
man.
there. I think there's different subsets. I mean, I have encountered people who definitely enjoy it, like a lot of Antifa types.
Hmm.
They're absolutely sadistic uh people who they just they've experienced some level of extreme insecurity or hurt or deprivation or something in their lives
Hmm.
that they have to balance it out by trying to destroy somebody else's life by going after random people who maybe they I don't they whether it's because they said something stupid years ago,
Hmm.
or they just had an axe to grind and wanted to just cancel them or whatever. Or I think that those people, like anybody who likes to see other people lose their ability to make a living for themselves and provide for themselves and their families, I think if you enjoy that kind of thing, you probably are the kind of person who tortures small animals and enjoys hatred for its own sake. And
Hmm.
in which case it's like, you would probably get along really well with, the kind of people in past movements who shoved
Yeah.
other people onto cattle cars and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's people who they have honestly had lived experiences in life that shaped their ideology or worldview in a way that may run really frustratingly contrary to whatever it is I believe.
Hmm.
And they're doing what they do honestly think and believe will result in the least amount of suffering and hurt in the world. I would say
Hmm.
that, like, for example, like the vast majority of my family is very liberal, and but we get along great. It's like, yeah, we have our various contentions and stuff. It's like I'm not gonna when they come over to visit, we're hanging out around a campfire or something. It's like I'm not going to be out there with a pistol on my hip and being like, oh, check out this new piece I got and stuff like that. It's like I'm not, it's like at the end of the day, it's like I know that they love me. I love them. We have a lot more in common than we have not in common. And I think if anytime you interact with people who are able to function in a way where it's they're like, you know what, I'm not going to be able to see the world the way you do, but it's worth it to focus on the things we do have in common. I think that those, I think that that's just where the hope is, as far as just not necessarily, like changing the world or whatever, but just being able to just get along and reduce everybody's anxiety a bit.
Yeah. This is a question I had for the last episode. I don't know how you would feel about this, but if there was like, within the next, let's say, 5 years, and there was like this nationwide, like bridging the gap kind of thing, like where do you think it would come from? Do you think it would come mainly from the left or from the right?
I think it would come from Jesus Christ and bodybuilding. Literally, I'm not even joking.
Yeah.
I think those are like literally the only things that will perhaps sort out this whole mess that we're in. I mean, I don't think Jesus needs much explanation, but the reason I say bodybuilding, I'm not a bodybuilder, as you can see. I mean, I do work out, but I'm not on the gear, and I don't have that level of commitment. At least not yet. Maybe when I hit my mid 40s, I'm gonna I'll probably go on the juice then. But it's like, you look at 80s and 90s bodybuilders, and it's like guys of every and women of every race possible, just bronzing out together. And it's like, I don't know, it can't be explained. It's, you either get it or you don't.
Do you think it's
And
you think it has to do with like maybe like a uniting, like people self-improving kind of thing?
I think so. I think it's also a humility thing too, because a lot of people have this idea that, oh, I don't want to. I'm afraid to go to the gym because all the people who are buffer than me will judge me and stuff because I'm fat or I'm too skinny or I'm weak. And I'm telling you, it's like the people in there who are like super fit are going to be the people who will care the least about where you're at. The level of humility that I've experienced with people who are, whether they're in MMA or bodybuilding or competitive strength lifting, powerlifting. That's the word. They're just some of the most humble people out there, and I think that it comes from I think that to engage in that kind of hobby or profession, if you can make it into that, really requires you to like look deep at your own weaknesses as a person and overcome them. And I think when you have that kind of introspection, I think that it does rewire things a little bit to where you're aware of uh your own weaknesses, your own failings. In my case, it's like I remember what it was like to be a fat kid, and so it's like I even though like in the Marines, I mean, yeah, we would bully people who are putting on pounds and stuff. It's like, now that I'm out of it, it's like I wouldn't do that now, because it's like I remember what that was like, and there's a better way to reach somebody like that. And it's, there are times where people like you extend you try to make a gesture of goodwill, and they'll just cut off the hand that you offer to them. And it's like, those people, it's like you just have to kick the dust off your shoes and just leave them to their own devices, let them sort it out on their own. But yeah, I think that people who are engaged in some kind of physically grounding activity like that, whether it's weightlifting or I don't know, living off the land or something like that, I think that more often than not all the time, but I think that has a humbling effect on people, and reduces their tendency to project negativity onto people who you might be different than them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, like last 2 years or so, I started dieting, working out, and I lost
Nice.
a good amount of weight. And I could honestly say that that was probably like just genuinely like the most like happy I was ever was. Because like you said, like there was this thing about like finding out my weaknesses and improving on them, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just didn't really realize that until now.
Oh,
Yeah,
congratulations on it.
I
Oh,
think there's like
thanks.
a probably like a direct correlation between physical health and mental health, and I think
Hmm.
that's part of the reason too. And
Hmm.
I don't know,
Oh yeah, I
maybe somebody
definitely
should
agree.
maybe somebody should say that to Rock. What
I
happened to
definitely agree. I
Rock?
mean, for me, the cognitive and emotional benefits of working out are like if even if I could not gain more muscle, I would still probably work out just for the mental benefits of it because I think it
Hmm.
just it it gets you out of your own head for a
Hmm.
while. And I think it really has a lot of benefits. And I think that I've always I've always noticed that the people who are just like some of the most spiteful,
Hmm.
kind of trollish types and stuff, whether they, the kind of people who are like prone to like canceling or doxing and just really like cruel behavior
Hmm.
and whatnot, they do tend to be people who they've kind of turned themselves into these like golem type creatures.
They're kind of like sort of resigned, just kind of giving up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's like they've given in to their darker self basically.
Um,
And that potential is in there in everybody, but you have to be aware of your own capacity for evil in order to uh
Hmm.
not do it. I think the people who think that they don't have the capacity for evil are some of the most dangerous people you could ever encounter.
Hmm.
well, your body. I don't know if I read this somewhere, but like your body does release like certain endorphins or something. Like when you exercise, you work out. Like when you, especially for me, like when like I do like doing like the like an hour long jog like on Mondays, just because it's like one of the harder days to wake up on. So like that's the day I wake up like the earliest. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll wake up between like 5 or 6 and like just go running for like an hour. And you just get this euphoria by the end of the run. You're just like, damn, like you can just, I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like you could do
Yeah.
anything. So it just kind of like, it just sets you up. It kind of sets you up for success because you're like, okay, I ran for an hour. Like everything else is going to be easy for the
Hmm.
rest of the
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, and the waking up early makes a huge difference too. I mean, every time I manage to stick to that, it makes a tremendous difference.
Yeah. I guess to kind of this is a question I kind of had in my head for a while. Because I've noticed like there's like this push to go away from like religion. I myself, I'm not really religious or at all, but
Hmm.
uh, I think that might be kind of affecting storytelling in a way because I'm sure you heard of like the hero's journey and also
Yeah.
what's his name, Joseph Campbell, I think his
Yeah,
name
just
Yeah.
is.
oh yeah, very very familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like because there's this like cultural like shift from going away from religion and even like looking down on it. I think that in a way is sort of affecting just mainstream storytelling in a way.
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
mean,
I don't think we're going away from religion though. We're going to like we're going into like satanic religion. That's what's happening.
I was about
Eh,
to say
yeah.
there's no such thing as going away from religion. There's just inventing new ones.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think that I mean, in my case, I mean, uh I have several like icons,
Hmm.
Orthodox icons on my prayer corner, I guess you could say. But
Hmm.
I think that the more you strip down holy icons or whatever you want to call them, like actual like religious icons or idols, if that's
Hmm.
your particular religion,
Hmm.
um it's going to be um hold on one second.
Should we be ending around soon, or what do you think?
Sorry about that. Got
No
another
problem.
knock at the door. What was I going to say? I think that yeah, if you take you know religious or like the ancient kind of religious iconography or symbols or whatever away, it's just going to be replaced with Funko Pops. I mean, it's like, what are Funko Pops? But I mean, they're basically the millennial equivalent of buying an eldritch idol from some dark bazaar
Mhm.
and forming a cargo cult around it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because I mean, I'm pretty sure you've seen that like famous interview with Joseph Campbell. I think from the '80s, where he's being interviewed like in George Lucas's ranch,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
Skywalker Ranch.
yeah, Skywalker Ranch, and he brings up like just his general idea of like so many just good stories deriving from like religious, subtexts and things like that. And if you compare like original Star Wars trilogy, like there's the hero's arc, and then you compare it
Hmm.
to the newer ones, like there's no arc. It's just gobbledygook, just
Yeah, I
nonsense.
I mean, they're kind of like trying to capture the arc, but here's the thing. I think the reason why, Lucas and Spielberg and a lot of those was it that particular wave of Hollywood, the reason why their stories resonated so much was because they came from a place of, real experience, uh that I think a lot of directors don't have anymore. You have a lot more storytellers who are, frankly, they're old money in Hollywood at this point,
Mhm,
whether that's literally or figuratively, and they're trying to tell stories with magic that they don't believe exists. And one of my favorite
mhm,
quotes was, I think it was, I can't remember if this was G.K. Chesterton or C.S. Lewis. They said I think it was Chesterton. He said that fairy stories, fantasy stories, don't teach us that dragons are necessarily real. They teach us that dragons can be slain.
mhm, mhm,
And I think a lot of modern storytelling is being told by people who believe neither.
mhm,
Um, I don't know. I think that when you strip away any kind of metaphysical or spiritual meaning from things, people are going to project it or try to get it out of whatever fandom it is that they
mhm,
completely obsess over, like like the Disney adult phenomena, or they're
mhm,
going to become part of some kind of racial idolatry cult or something like that. They're going to find a god somewhere.
mhm,
It could be kind of benign and just sort of pop culture-y, or it could end up being something a little bit more violent and ideological. Um, and I think that the quality of popular storytelling is kind of a reflection of that. People are afraid of being critiqued for telling a story that has any spiritually high stakes involved,
mhm,
and so they stick with stuff that has, maybe they instinctively they want to tell something with higher stakes, but they chop their steps because they're afraid of
mhm,
being seen as a try hard or something like that.
mhm. Yeah. How long have we been going? Oh,
um about about an hour, hour and a half or something.
yeah. We normally do the show about roughly about an hour and a half on average.
Yeah, we could wind down. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to wind down? Okay. I guess I don't know if you wanted to generally just like plug anything that you're working on, your website.
Yeah. If you just go to my website, reaganlodge.com, you'll see a link to my graphic novel that's in production. That's my number one thing. I do live streams on Twitch where
Mhm,
as I'm drawing and creating the book, you can see my whole process, ask questions, hang out and stuff. I generally have a pretty good time there. I'm also most active art wise on Instagram. So if you go to my website, there's an Instagram link there, or you can just follow me directly on Instagram. It's just
mhm.
Reagan Lodge, ReaganLodge. And I guess if you do show notes, you can just put the link in there too. And if anybody's interested in getting my book when it launches on Indiegogo in a few months, I would recommend you join my mailing list so that way you get notified in advance before it launches.
I'll try to link it up to the video. All
Cool.
this stuff.
Yeah. If it's possible. If not, don't worry about it.
I guess lastly too, did you have any like I guess advice for anyone that just like kind of within the art world just like wanted to just go on their own and create their own stuff.
Yeah, I would say one of the try to do is I'm not saying to be like a total like loner, like lone wolf kind of guy about it, but do everything you can to create your own audience and platform on your own before trying to ride on somebody else's coattails. I mean, it's good to collaborate a little bit,
Mhm,
but also be careful about you know, joining groups just because they share the same political alignment or something like that.
mhm,
Just, treat everybody with the respect that you would want them to treat you back. If they don't treat you with respect, just ignore them.
mhm,
Don't get caught up in online drama, especially. It'll
mhm,
sap your energy. Don't get swept up in whatever the latest political outrage is, whether regardless of what your beliefs are. Just focus on making something that you love, and the people who appreciate it
mhm,
will find it if you make a good effort to make yourself discoverable. So
mhm,
that'd be the best advice I have. Try to be on as many platforms as you can be on without stretching yourself too thin,
mhm.
and just be a as positive person as you can be, while still being real and sincere. And I think you'll go far.
It's good. Benevolent, you had any last questions with Reagan?
No, actually, I think he answered like most of them. I think, well, actually, like in the very beginning, I just there was like a gap between. You said you went to Cal Arts and then
Yeah,
the
yeah,
military.
briefly.
So how did you go
Yeah.
from Cal Arts to the military?
Oh, yeah,
How did that
I
happen?
can make that quick. But basically,
Yeah.
so I worked professionally as an artist before I went into the Marines. So it's like I did the Cal Arts summer program, and then kind of before and after that, I also did some community college art classes and stuff. And then I got my first comic jobs with the Flight Anthologies and Nickelodeon magazine, and it was while I was doing I was wrapping up uh my final comic for the Flight Anthology that it just sort of hit me that I was in my early 20s working 12 hours a day behind a desk, 7 days a week, doing all these stories about characters that were living out adventures that I'll never have.
Mhm.
And I don't know, it was just this feeling of like, I
The
even though
start of the heroes. Sorry.
I mean, it kind of was. It's like
Yeah.
I had this sense that
Yeah.
even though I grew up country and stuff, I had a little bit more of a slightly rough childhood than a lot of my peers. I had never been taught a lot of other things about how to function as an adult,
I see.
and I just kind of had this sense that I was still trapped in this Peter Pan mode, even though I was out living on my own, supporting myself through the arts and stuff. And I nobody had ever taken me aside and taught me, like, aside from just like kind of how to defend myself a little bit. Nobody had taught me like how to be a man really,
Mhm,
and there was no, like, coming of age ritual for our generation. There was no walkabout or vision quest
mhm,
or something like that. So for me, it was like, well, there's something very much missing in my life, and I need to learn these skills. I need to experience greater hardship than I've already gone through in order to know if I can ever overcome it. And the Marine Corps, with two wars waging at the time, seemed like the most sensible option.
Well, which ones? Once again, were you involved in again?
I was in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. My deployment was as a personal security detail. So basically my job was to drive a vehicle, escorting persons of high importance around, the city, get them from point A to point B without getting blown up and stuff, or act as, function as their bodyguard if it came down to it, things like that. So it was pretty exciting.
mhm.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Kind of like the start of a hero's journey right there. Cool.
If you
Yeah.
it helps to
Call to
kind of
adventure.
frame, it helps to retroactively frame things like that, just so you can have a way to try and make sense of any of it, I guess.
Cool.
All right. I guess we'll just call that the episode. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll see you guys next time. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right, man. Thanks. Thanks.